Hey everybody, this is Jason from the Landlord Lunch. I want to welcome you back to our, this week we're covering the eviction process. So we just got wrapped up with kind of a rent collection process, and now we are going in to explore what happens, not only one, if they don't pay rent, but what if they violate a provision of the lease agreement. We're going to touch on that as well. We're going to take a little deeper dive into like the notice to quit and some of those types of things. So we have a lot to cover here. We'll jump right in and see where the day takes us. So the eviction process. So this is, we're back to our overall process to where, it started with the rent collections, but we are making the assumption that this person hasn't paid, and with this process that we've lined out here, it's time to turn that file over to the attorney. Now, usually what's sent over to attorney on a non-payment of rent is going to be something along the lines of the lease agreement. You're going to send over a copy of the tenant ledger to show all the charges and the payments that have been made. You're going to give them a copy of the 3-day, 5-day, 7-day notice to quit that was sent. And then if there's something else going on, like if it's for a lease violation as well, you're gonna submit documentation proving what you're stating and why you're asking the court to remove them from the property. So if they violated the lease, you give them the chance to cure. They haven't done that, you're going to provide that stuff as well. So before we get too far into this, I want to just kind of go back over our disclaimers. I've mentioned this from time to time. This actually kind of is something that's good to know just for everything, really. But this is going to be a basic overview of the eviction process. Okay, so each state's going to be different. Again, in the resource section, I'm going to leave you some links that you can get from, there's more than one resource link as well, to where you can go in state by state and look at the landlord tenant law specifically. You can look at some of the resources these different links are provided, and just know your laws is ultimately what I'm working with. With the eviction process, a lot of times it's good to work with an attorney. In some states and some jurisdictions, if you're an LLC or incorporated of some sort, you have to work with an attorney. You can't even represent yourself in those particular situations. And then, like I said, we're not going to be just doing non-payment. We're also going to touch on some of those situations where a provision in a lease has been violated and kind of what that looks like as well. So the impact of an eviction on the landlord. How does it affect us? What does it do? So first off, we lose our rent. That's the biggest one. And that's the primary connection that we have with the tenant. We've said that, hey, we are going to provide you a safe and a habitable home for you to live in. We're going to make sure to maintain that home for you. And in exchange, you're going to pay us a certain amount of money every single month to stay there. If they stop doing that, then that's it. They violated the main reason you were giving them access to your home, so it's time to get them out. Other things, legal fees, cost us money, cost the eviction attorney fees. It actually, depending on what your court system is like, depending on how long this drags on, depending on, how you have to serve notices, all that stuff. There's more than just legal fees. There's other fees in there. Any damages or cleaning that you have to do in terms of them not taking care of your home. And usually with an eviction, there's always damages and cleaning. I've never had an eviction where they've left the place rent ready and pristine. I can guarantee that. If it ends up becoming more major issues, like if you're evicting them for drug issues, perhaps like a meth lab is a great example where that is an extremely expensive remediation process. And those things happen. So you could run into something like that. And then you have to worry about things like storage of personal property. Make sure you get your notices right, because after all of that, if you don't do that right, then they can come back and hit you on that. And it's a pain. It's a financial pain. It's stressful. It takes a lot of your time. So quite an impact, actually. And that's not including all the mortgage, taxes, insurance that you have to cover out of your pocket because you're not getting that rent, maybe covering the utilities, any of those operating expenses you have to take care of. Of course, like I said, the vacancy loss, that's a big one. So evictions are not fun. Nobody wants to do them. But that's no reason to let somebody stay there either, not paying. Matter of fact, if you do that and you put your head in the sand, it's just going to get worse. Okay, so let's talk about eviction notices. There's a couple general types of eviction notices. An eviction notice is basically something from the landlord to the tenant that informs the tenant that they have violated some provision in the lease agreement, and that they have to correct that within a certain amount of time, or you are going to have them evicted, removed from the premises, which is an eviction. So first one we have is our notice to pay or quit, which is non-payment of rent type issues. We have a notice to comply, which has to do with the violation of lease provisions. You're basically saying, hey, you've broken this or you violated this lease provision. You need to get back in line with this and don't do it again, or else. And then the unconditional notice to quit, which is usually, along the lines of there is no right to cure, or they've done it too many times. I think we dig into this a little bit more here as well. We'll take a look at a few of those. Okay, so yeah, notice to pay or quit. Again, when rent hasn't been paid, a financial sum hasn't been paid, actually rent, notice to pay rent or quit, then this is when this is going to be issued. It demands the tenant pays the amount in full or vacate within a certain period of time. They're typically 3, 5, or 7 day notices, which we've talked about a couple times already within this section. And then I always recommend that the first day that it's late, that it gets served. Don't wait, get it out, get it over there, because if they're not going to pay, you want to get them out as soon as possible. And an extra week matters. Let's take a look at, I know I had a screenshot of one earlier. Let's just pull one over here and take a look at a notice to quit here. That's my payment agreement. All right, notice to quit for non-payment of rent and intention to commence action. This is, again, a 3-day notice. But again, you got your basic information up here, the date that's being posted or sent, the date that's being issued, rather, who you're issuing it to, the property address, city, state, and zip. Some standard verbiage. Each state's going to be different. You can find templates. Actually, within the Forms Vault, I have sample 3-day notices, 5 days, 7 days, whatever your state uses for all the states that are there. Dig through those. Look online. Once again, always have your attorney put their eyes on it to make sure it's legit and that there's no verbiage that's changed or verbiage that they want to add, because sometimes they have their own verbiage on there they want to put in there that helps them do their job, makes their job easier based on whatever jurisdiction they're in. Just because it works for the state doesn't mean that it can't be made better based on the circuit, their court circuit that they have to operate in, and the judges they have to deal with. Sometimes there's some very specific things they want in there to help them do their job and get them out quicker. But this one here is, you're hereby notified that within 3 days you must either pay rent and late charges in the amount of such and such, plus any additional late fees which are past due, or quit and surrender the possession of the following described rental unit located at such and such. Should you fail to do so, you're notified this will be turned over to attorney. So again, you have this many days to pay this amount of money, or this is what we are going to do. And after that amount of time has passed, you don't even have to accept it from that point forward. This goes on to put where you may, and again, if you don't have a payment address on here, review this paperwork, make sure it works for you. But this goes on to put like an address in on where they can send certified funds or whatever else. Again, I wouldn't accept credit card payments or checks for any of this stuff. I mean, if you do online portals, I think you could turn off credit card payments and only allow them to do like ACH payments, which comes out of their checking account, and that's perfectly fine because they really can't reject that. It's not a check, it's a direct automatic payment out of their account. Again, I usually post these on the door, but there's also a manner of service here. So dated, when it was prepared, who prepared it, if I send it, manner of service, email, date I emailed, manner of service, U.S. Postal Office, who was delivered by USPS. If it was certified mail, USPS, date that you sent it out. And again, I always like to post one and send one out. If you can post one. Not everybody is close to their rental property, and it's not always convenient, but that's what a basic 3-day, 5-day, 7-day is going to look like. Again, in a lot of cases, there's going to be some specific state language that may be popped in here as well, depending on where you're at. So, but this is a good template to take a look at and just kind of review for our purposes. Okay. The notice to comply. So this again is used when a lease violation has occurred, and it does basically the same thing. It says, hey, you violated this lease provision. You have this many days to correct it, and that is going to vary from state to state. And if you don't correct it within a certain period of time, then we are going to proceed with removing you from the premises. So we'll use Kansas because Kansas, I'm familiar with, is a 1430, and that's what we called them. We called them issue them a 1430. That means they had 14 days to correct the situation, and if they didn't correct the situation, there's a 30-day notice to move out. And if you issue this notice to comply and they do comply and then it happens again, you don't have to reissue this. You can just go on and give them the next notice, which is, you know, a notice to move, or non-compliance, I think is what we call it on here, which we'll talk about. But I like the 1430 because it's kind of 2-in-1. It's your notice to comply, and if you don't comply, hey, you may just consider this a 30-day notice to vacate. Let's take a look at that real quick. Actually, I don't even know if this is a 1430. Let's see. Yep, here it is. So when it is a lease violation, this is where I like to be specific in the lease and lease addendums, because when you issue a tenant notice of non-compliance, you should really be addressing something specific. You shouldn't say, I don't know, you violated the lease agreement because of noise. What do you mean noise? Get specific. Say example, you know, be specific. So you violated the lease agreement due to a noise complaint that we received and a police report that was filed at 1 a.m. per your lease agreement. You know, the noise-free hours are between 10 p.m. and whatever. Point is, you're able to reference something specific within the lease that they have violated, and then have some sort of documentation or proof or complaint or something along those lines that backs up that claim. Don't be general with these, be specific. If you go in front of a court and you're just real general and you can't really back it up, and it's just a he said versus he said, she said type scenario, 10-to-1 a landlord will lose on that. So be specific, write it out here, and then, like, again, know your laws, check out the sample state-specific tenant non-compliance or notice to compliance that you have in the forms vault. Compare those with what's out there. If you have an attorney, have them take a look at it. Maybe they have verbiage they want to add. You know, use the ones that you should be using. Last thing you want to do is go through all of this and the court be like, this isn't even a valid notice. I've never seen that happen, but you definitely want to make sure, you know, your I's are dotted on this stuff. But like this one, it even says on here that the rental agreement will terminate 30 days from the receipt of this notice. You are expected to vacate the premises on or before such a date unless the breach listed above can be and are remedied within 14 days of this notice. So that is just basically saying that on this situation, we are giving you your right to cure, because usually there's a right to cure requirement when it comes to this type of stuff within the court system to be able to proceed. And if you've given them the right to cure and they didn't cure it, or if they violate it over and over again, then the court will allow you to go on and move forward with this. And then give them what that remedy is. You know, maybe it's maybe the dog destroyed a couple pickets on the fence. You know, must repair these and schedule inspection by such and such date with the landlord to ensure that the repairs have been completed by a qualified contractor. Whatever it is, you know, get specific on here. You want to put your own eyes on it. You want to make sure that it is remedied, or at the very least that there's a good faith effort to remedy. Let's say that they've hired a contractor and they're going to replace the whole line of that fence, but that contractor can't get to it for 4 weeks. It's a licensed contractor, it's legitimate, you approve the contract, everything's good to go, but this is on the contractor's term. Okay, it's good. I mean, it's not like the tenant hasn't tried to take care of this, and that is a good faith effort. So you can consider this cure. Now, in 3 weeks, if that contractor doesn't show up and you call the contractor and it was canceled, that's not good faith. That is a violation, and you can move on with the eviction then. So with this particular one, again, like I said, this is kind of a good this is a good example of both the notice to comply and a final notice of non-compliance, which we're going to look at a notice of non-compliance exclusively as well. But this is also stating that if this is non-compliance, this section is marked. The breach cannot be remedied. You must vacate the premises by date noted above. For what reason? This is the second notice of the same or similar violation, like we talked about. There is no remedy for this violation. They got caught cooking a meth lab. Get out. Or building a meth lab and cooking a lab. That's a drug-free, crime-free violation. There is no remedy for that. You got to leave. And then any additional supporting documentation, you show them the documentation that you have. Now, again, if you have a tenant written complaint, you don't want to include the tenant written complaint here saying, yeah, Mrs. Jones sent an email on this date, because then there may be some retaliation against that specific tenant. Don't do that. But if there's some documentation that you can send that helps back this up, great. If not, hold it close. If it exposes something you don't want to expose, hold it close to the chest. Keep it for court if you ever have to go to court. That's fine. And then sign and date. Again, I personally like to certify these. That way there's proof of service, proof that they've received them. For myself, you can get away with the post and the mail of these as well, just like you do with the 3-day, but do what works for you, of course. Okay, so let's take a look at one of the unconditional notice to quit. You saw an example there on page 2 of that 1430 is just basically there is no remedy for this, or you violated this time and time again. There is a separate notice you can use for that, which is the unconditional notice to quit. And in some states you may have to have a separate exclusive unconditional notice to quit. Again, used at that time frame to cure the violation is passed. Some states, like with Kansas, you could do the 1430. Some states, it may be if they haven't cured it in 14 days, then you have to issue a 30-day notice from there. It just kind of depends where you're at, and that's where it'd be a good example of where a separate notice would have to be sent. You can use this when the violation cannot be cured, similar to what we were talking about with like the drug-free, crime-free stuff, repeated violations. Oh, here it is, drug-free, crime-free violation. Because that's when I used them a lot, was in situations where drug-free, crime-free provisions were. And really all it is just a 30-day notice to vacate. This is an example of it. Date, address, you're hereby notified that within 30 days you must quit and surrender the position or the possession. Here's the reasons. Here's the certification language. And if you like this certification language, copy and paste it to the other notices. I kind of like this. Delivered copy of demand to who? Leaving copy with. If the tenant's Jim Jones and you left it with Jim Jones, well, write Jim Jones. Posting said notice on the premises, which is usually the one that I mark along with sent via USPS, and this is also certified mail because that's who you certify it through. So this is just an example. Again, I think in the landlord vault there's a lot of state specific folders in the landlord forms vault. So check those out, check your state, see what those templates look like there for you. Again, this is a real general one. The state-specific ones, a lot of times if there's specific language that needs to be in there that references, whatever the Fair Housing Act is, Tenant Landlord Act, a lot of those specific ones have that language in there, have it reviewed. Usually though, to be quite honest with you, I don't think I've ever seen a judge be like, no, we can't proceed with this because you've used the wrong notice. I don't think I've ever seen that. Not that I can recall, at least. But again, I recommend that you always have a set of legal eyes on it. And you're going to have a set of legal eyes on it anyway. I mean, if you issue this and you have to go to court and you're being represented, the attorney's going to tell you real quick, oh, we don't want to use this moving forward. Let's start using this form or whatever. But I've never heard an attorney say, I have said that, say, hey, let's change this, let's add this, but I've never said, hey, we can't proceed using this. We have to change this and reuse this right now. So I think you'll get that information just kind of as you know and grow, and once you have it, hold on to it. But again, I think those forms, those sample forms in the Landlord Tenant Vault are pretty solid for the most part. They're a great place to start at least. Okay, so what are the most common reasons that landlord evicts their tenants? Well, Well, non-payment of rent's the first and foremost. I would imagine that's where a majority of all evictions come from, and that's the, again, like we said, that's the number one agreement between a landlord and a tenant. I'm gonna provide you this home to live in, and you're gonna pay me rent in exchange. If they don't do that, they have to leave. I mean, as simple as that. If they continually repeat the violations, the same lease violations over and over and over again, if they bring a pet into the home, they're not supposed to have pets. You give them a 1430 or whatever your notice is. We'll just use 1430. If they don't comply and they don't have that pet out within 14 days, then see you later. Got to go. Legal activities, another big one. Drug-free, crime-free. The provisions in the drug-free, crime-free are a big one. And then especially with apartments, if it starts getting into a situation where one tenant is harassing another tenant, their right to live, quiet enjoyment, harassing them, starting fights with them, things along those lines, then that's another reason that I've evicted a lot, especially in apartment communities. It's more so than the houses. There are situations, though. There was a situation that came up that in one of our groups, somebody was asking about where this person the tenant had a child, which basically, the way they described it, screamed bloody murder all throughout the day. And it was a row house, and this landlord didn't own the other side of this home where they had a shared wall, and that tenant was complaining about the noise that was coming from this child all day. So quite a predicament, and then within it, and depending on how the landlord wanted to proceed with that, I think there could be a precedent, especially if there's not disturbing your neighbor's right to quiet enjoyment, to where they can issue lease violations based on that. And if that mother cannot figure out how to get that situation under control, then ask them to leave. So there's definitely, because you want to respect your neighbors, you want to make sure they're happy with you, because they are going to be your number one source of anything that's going on weird over there. You want to be on good terms with them. You own the place. Hopefully they own the place. Well, in most cases they own the place. Maybe they're renters. Not that you couldn't have neighbors that are landlords as well, but the point is you want to be in good relations with the people that are in your neighborhood. Okay, so let's look at kind of what the standard eviction process looks like in court for non-payment. And it's similar with lease violations as well. But again, we're going to post that notice to pay or quit, your 3-day, 5-day, 7-day. And again, we've talked about that. We're going to submit that tenant file to the attorney. And a lot of times, if you're using the same attorney, they have their own things that they want to do. Like they'll have a cover sheet where you'll fill out all the information that they need, and then the lease and the pay or quit and the tenant ledger and the copy of that notice and whatever, that's all going to be provided, and that's the packet that they want. From there, what they're going to do, they're going to file it. Depending on the court and when it gets filed, a hearing will be scheduled. Sometimes the hearings are in person these days. There's a lot of like telehearings, whether just on a telephone, sometimes they're on Zoom. It kind of depends where you're at and how your court system wants to proceed. The judge is going to review the situation. The arguments are going to be made. The judge is going to make a decision. If everything goes in your favor, court will grant you possession. If they don't, there may be also the possibility that it gets continued. If it's, there's a possibility that the court doesn't grant you possession and gives the tenant the right to cure it one more time, and then from there, it gets a little more complicated. Your attorney will be able to walk you through what happens then. But if you have your stuff together, 9 times out of 10, you should get possession. Even in tenant-friendly states, if they are just not paying rent, most times, and I say that because especially post-COVID, some courts have gotten really wacky and have really extended the amount of time that they'll let a tenant stay. And some states are actually taking a precedent now to where the attorneys can request that the eviction gets stricken from the record because it'll impact that tenant's ability to find future housing. Some really wacky stuff. In my opinion, that's the whole point of an eviction. 1, to get them out, and 2, make sure they can't do this to another landlord. But different argument, different course, different section. But again, if that goes down that route, follow the advice of your attorney at that point in time, and it will work out. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to be more frustrating, but that is the life of a landlord. You're bound to run into it if you're a landlord long enough. You're bound to run into it. So be prepared for it. Just take a deep breath. Be prepared. That's all I can say is be prepared. But 9 times out of 10, you'll get possession, and then from there, yeah. Let's stay on here. From there, what will end up happening is the judge will usually give the tenant a day that they have to be out. And they may say, okay, you have to have everything out of this premises by this date. It's usually a week, maybe 2 weeks, something along those lines. And theoretically, that tenant is supposed to be completely moved out and give you back keys. That very rarely happens. And then if that doesn't happen, then there is usually a process, and depending on where you live and what the enforcement procedures are, it's either sheriff or constable or whatever it's called, magistrate. Depending on where you're at. There's a process that goes into place to where you either have to file a writ. They'll contact you, you contact them to schedule them to meet you at the property to forcibly remove the tenant. And you can either change the locks. Hopefully your key still works. If not, you can drill the locks out. They'll ask them to leave. They give them like 5 minutes to get everything that they can get their hands on to get out at that point in time. You change the locks, you now have possession. Everything's in their home. Everything's left in their home. That's why it's really a good idea for them just to get out. But very rarely does it happen. They sit there and holler about, well, all my stuff's here. What do I do? Where do I go? Well, it's not like you didn't know this was coming. The judge was very clear on that. But that is generally what the eviction process looks like as it kind of goes through the non-payment. And it's similar with the lease violation as well. Let's take a look at that. So with the lease violation, that eviction notice is posted, and by the eviction notice, it's going to be your notice to comply or non-compliance, whatever that ends up happening. You're going to want to have evidence to back this up. These are a little more difficult to push through the court. Non-pays are pretty black and white. You have the tenant ledger, and they can either prove they paid rent or they didn't, or they can't, and then the judgment is a pretty easy decision to make. Sometimes these lease violations are a little trickier, so you want to have your ducks lined up for sure, I's dotted, T's crossed, and have any backup pictures, written complaints from neighbors, police reports, whatever else it is. Then you're going to submit all that to the attorney. You're going to submit the notice, whether it's the first notice to comply, then the second one to get out, or the 1430. You're going to want to give their backup. You're going to want to give a lease agreement, whatever else they need, their tenant, their information sheet, whatever they need. That's going to be the packet that they get. Same thing from there, though. Hearing's going to be scheduled. A judge is going to evaluate it, and he's going to make a decision. He's going to say, yeah, they violated the lease agreement. You gave them a chance to comply. They didn't comply. I'm going to grant you possession. Or they're going to say, yeah, you did all that stuff, but we're going to give them one more chance. Or they're going to say, no, you didn't prove that they violated the lease. It's too vague. Whatever the case may be, they're going to give you the decision, and that's what you are going to end up living with. And from there, a couple things can happen. You can appeal it, or you can wait to the next lease violation, and you can try again. Pretty cut and dry, really. So evidence, what kind of evidence? One, stuff that you can prove. Again, written statements. If the neighbors are sending you emails saying dogs are barking all throughout the night and they're not cleaning up the waste and it smells, and you have a no pet policy, and so written statements from the neighbors, pictures are great, police reports, again, there's your email correspondence, recorded conversations. Again, do it legally. There are some states where only one person on the call has to be aware that it's recorded. But let's say you're talking to the tenant and you're recording it, and the dog's barking in the background. Okay, well, it's pretty obvious there's a dog there at the house, assuming that you can prove that they weren't at their sister's house or whatever. That may not be a great example on the dog, but legal recorded conversations are great proof if you obtain them legally. Any type of pictures, any type of videos. I'm not suggesting that you put video in their home or whatever else, but if you go over to the home and there's 3 dogs running around a dog house and poop all over the backyard, and you have recording of everything that's going on there, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Pictures of that same scenario, that is perfectly acceptable evidence. But the point being is that if you're going to give them a lease violation for violating a no pet provision of that, and you can show them that, on your screening criteria that you said no pets, on their application they didn't list pets, in their lease agreement it says no pets, you give them a notice saying they have to get the pets out of there, they didn't comply, so you give them a 30-day notice, they still didn't leave, and they still have the pets, and you provide backup of all those things, that judge is going to say, you have to leave. It's going to be pretty simple. If you don't do that, and if you give opportunities for either the attorney on the other end to spin that, or for the tenant to have explanations that cast doubts on the claim that you're making, the judge very well may say, hey, listen, I understand, but this isn't enough evidence to show that they've actually violated this. I'm not convinced that they actually have this animal there, or that this is your house, or that, they didn't know they were supposed to have an animal, whatever the case may be. They may say, yeah, you violated all these things. I'm going to give you 14 days to get this dog out of there. And if you don't do it, then we're going to reschedule a hearing, and then I'm going to tell you you're going to have to leave. They may give him more time. Who knows? I mean, it really depends on where you live, but you want to have as much as you can, just foolproof as possible. So evidence is great. Back up what you're saying. Okay, so when should you file? As soon as you can. I mean, if they're not going to be a good tenant, if they're not going to follow the provisions of your lease, if they're not going to pay you rent, you need to get them out. Non-pay, as soon as the rent is late, get them out. Compliance issues, when you've given them the notice, to comply, and they haven't complied within the time frame, and you have your evidence, and you've given them the 30-day notice to leave, and they're still there and they haven't complied, get them out as soon as possible. Because the thing is, anyone that is not going to comply with the lease agreement, not going to pay, not going to follow the provisions of the lease, is going to ultimately cause more and more damage. It's going to be more of a headache, and we understand as landlords that we are going to deal with these situations, but that's not why we got into this. That is not the way a lot of tenants are. A majority of the tenants I've ever dealt with I've never had an issue with. It's like the 10%, especially with the property management company. 90% of the tenants never even heard from. I mean, they moved in, everything worked great. Every once in a while, maintenance would come in, we'd take care of it, and we try to renew their lease. I mean, it was more of a challenge for us to just keep a relationship with them, because it just, especially with houses, it was set it and forget it almost. But it was 10% of those that caused the most problems, the most headaches, the most damage, and you could almost count on people that are giving you troubles here would destroy the home, which would cost you a lot more money. It would usually end up in eviction, usually loss of rent, and usually that would drag on a little bit. So as soon as you can deal with a problem, deal with it. Don't procrastinate, I guess is what I'm saying. Make sure to stay consistent and follow your processes though. If you're gonna, again, file that, if you're gonna issue that 3-day that notice to quit on the first day it's late, do it for everybody. What we don't want to get into is fair housing issues. You don't want to issue a 3-day on a single mother, and then on the second every single time, and then for a white male, for example, since that's kind of the controlled subject, on the 5th or the 6th, because then you're treating people different in the way that you apply and enforce your rules. So stay consistent with your process and policies. If you haven't watched the fair housing component of this course, please go back and watch that. It's extremely important. Stay consistent. And there we go, if you treat tenants differently. But basically, the point here is, when should you file? As soon as you possibly can, because it's not going to get better. Now, having said that, if the tenant's being proactive with you on rent, and they're saying, I don't get paid till Friday, my rent's due on Wednesday, I know there's a late fee, I promise I'm going to take care of this, and they haven't given you reason to otherwise doubt them, fine, go with them. Give them the benefit of the doubt. If they violate that, don't give them the benefit of the doubt anymore. If they call you and say, hey, listen, my dog got out, destroyed this door, how would you like me to handle? I will pay for everything. And if you're like, hey, listen, I'm gonna send my contractor over there, like, yeah, that's perfect, but I really don't have the money to pay for this until here. Can we set up a payment arrangement? And that tenant's being proactive, and you work it out, and they're doing right by you, and good faith stuff is going on, then fine, let it go until it's, well, don't let it go, but give them the benefit of the doubt and work with them, because good tenants are worth keeping. Now, if it's a reverse, if you show up and you do a quarterly inspection, this door is destroyed and carpet's all destroyed, it smells like urine, and the tenant says, hey, can you just work with me? No, you have to get this dog out. We said no dogs, and this is why. And then 14 days later, you come back and the damage isn't fixed and it still stinks and the dog's still there. Get them out. It's only going to get worse. It's not like that dog's not going to cause more damage. So, you use your logic here. Be reasonable when it calls for it. But other than that, if the tenant's not being proactive and something comes up, get them out as soon as you can, because it's just going to cause you more headaches. How long does it normally take to get a completion, an eviction gone through, get a completion of an eviction? So this largely depends on where you're located, how the judge sees evictions, how they look at things. Is it a pro-tenant or a pro-landlord state? Yes, that's a real thing. And it's not just at the judge. The judge may sit there and say, I agree that this person has violated every single thing that you said, and here's your proof and whatever else, but they really need a place to live, and we're going to give them a month to find a new place to live, so my possession date's here. Okay, so they have another month to live in my home free, destroy it more while they find another place to live, but they've given you possession. Another judge may be like, you need to be out of here by Friday. Again, if that judge has given possession for a month down the road, yes, you could probably appeal it and try to get that done sooner. I don't know that would make any difference, but there's always that. You can try to speed it up that way. But the other component too is that once that date of possession that the judge issues is passed, how long does it take for the sheriff or the magistrate or the constable or whatever to process that and get over there? During COVID, at one point in time, when COVID was kind of wrapping up and things are loosening back up in the courts and courts are opening back up, we actually had some constables sit there and say they were going to refuse to enforce the writ, and they pulled out and started reading like laws and stuff, trying to justify their actions or why they didn't have to enforce that, because the constable actually felt that that person deserved more time. So what we had was a court order of possession that a constable wouldn't enforce. So we ended up having to get this was a property management company. We had to get the attorneys involved and go after, the county, the governmental agency that oversaw that or whatever, and ultimately they did get back there and did their job, and that stopped. But you never know what you're going to run into, I guess is what I'm saying. I would say on average from start to finish, 2 to 3 months is a pretty safe time frame to where you can have that, get those people out and get it to a point where you can start marketing again, because that, I would also say that includes getting all of the tenant's personal property and possessions out of there, the storage and the notification requirements, maybe even the turnaround time and everything. But 2 to 3 months is what it's going to hit you at once you start that possession. So be prepared for that. Be prepared. Maybe it's quicker. Hopefully it's quicker. I want it to be quicker for you, but on average 2 to 3 months. Okay, so what we were talking about, getting possession back, that tenant may not leave. We have to file that writ or whatever that process is. We have to get somebody out there to forcibly remove that tenant, and we could change the locks at that point in time and dispose of the personal property. And depending on your state, there's various requirements for how to dispose of personal property. Sometimes we get into that. Sometimes sometimes you have to post, like in Kansas, if I remember right, it was you had to put a notice in the newspaper or some sort of publication that said all items at this address will be disposed of on this date, and that'd be 14 days from the date of notice. So if you waited 3 weeks to put the notice in, you still had to get 14 days from the point of that notice for those people to come claim those items. Now they also said in Kansas that if that person hasn't paid that amount in full, that there was a provision in there where you don't have to give that back to them, that you could sell that stuff, you can inventory, you could sell it, you can apply the proceeds to the amount that's due. Usually, though, with the storage and the vacancy loss and the time and the hassle, nobody ever did that because it was never worth it anyway. Most of the stuff was trash, just like this picture. I mean, if you're evicting somebody, it's not like 9 times out of 10, they didn't have really nice stuff there anyway. Half of it is usually rent-to-own stuff that, we'd let the companies pack in to get, so it just wasn't worth it. So know how to handle personal property. If it is trash, if it's food, if it's rotting, if it's something that can bring pests in, you can throw it away. That's not a big deal. But be careful with how you handle personal property. Don't just go throw stuff away. Make sure you understand the notification and storage requirements. Usually, to be quite honest with you, I think usually we just left the property in the actual unit and got that notice in, because by moving it, we would have to inventory it, we would have to move it to a storage, which we'd have to pay for. We'd have to pay for people to move that stuff over there, and by the time you add up those costs and hassle and everything else, it really just didn't matter. It was better just leave it in a unit for the 14 days to see if they would come get it, and if they didn't, we just throw everything away from that point. And again, like I said, some states allow you to sell and recoup the cost, but just usually wasn't worth it. I remember one of my favorite stories is it was a hoarding situation. I mean, you couldn't walk through this place. Trash was piled so high, and we went through everything. But I mean, we didn't even dispose of anything like trash. Everything was pretty much trash anyway. And I mean, there was rats in the house. It was a horrible situation. They tried to come back after us like 6 months later, saying that there were like gold coin collectibles worth like $50,000 that we stole from them that was in there. And it was just funny to me because you see the pictures of this place, and I mean, it was just the most disgusting thing. You couldn't even imagine the smell. Some of you can, some of you've dealt with this, but the smell, you couldn't walk in there and keep the clothes that you had because that smell just doesn't come out. And then, they tried coming after us for saying that we stole $50,000 coins. Of course, they had no proof. And after the pictures, the judge just said, basically, get out of here. You're wasting all of our time, which was nice. For a long time in Kansas, we had a really fair judge that I dealt with, at least. And he was fair. When we were in the wrong, he called us out on it, and sometimes we messed up. It is what it is. We weren't perfect, but it was really good about holding everybody accountable. He wasn't pro-tenant, he wasn't pro-landlord. He was just, he read the law as it was and applied it, which was very nice. After he left, not as lucky. Okay, what are some of the ways we can kind of avoid and minimize the evictions that we deal with and avoid getting into the situation in the first place? So first and foremost, set up and adhere to a screening criteria, and make sure you follow it. Okay, make sure that you apply this to everybody in a consistent manner. If you haven't watched the screening section, which I hope that by this point that you have, make sure you do that. Have that in place, because what that's going to do is going to allow you to eliminate a lot of the type of people it's going to minimize your evictions you're going to have to deal with, because your screening criteria should be set up in such a way that you're looking for people that haven't had evictions, past behavior has a tendency to repeat itself. So you're looking for people with no evictions, people that have a good income, that can pay for the home, people that have good rental references, and those things that you're requiring for that person to move in. Usually, not always, you're always going to run into them no matter how good they look, but it's going to minimize it. It's going to reduce the number of times you have to deal with this. That's the first and foremost, the best recommendation I can say is screen every applicant thoroughly. Check those references well. If they are giving you a story, don't listen, just walk away. I mean, if they still want to apply, that's fine. Apply the same screening process. But every time there is a story about how this happened and that happened, and some of them are tearjerkers too. I mean, some people can really, really lay it on thick, and maybe even it's true. Maybe it's true, but you know what? The times that it could be true compared to the majority of the times that it's not, and you're just getting scammed and played, it's not worth even taking the chance. So once again, if you have a screening criteria in place and you stick to it, it eliminates that. Say, hey, listen, I'm really sorry to go through that. That's horrible. Unfortunately, if you're in a bankruptcy, I can't lease to you per our screening criteria. If you're in there, I don't want you to waste your application fee. You're more than welcome to apply, but if a bankruptcy shows up on your credit report, I'm going to have to deny the application. Yeah, but you have no idea what it was like. No, I don't. I really don't know what it's like, and I'm really sorry you had to deal with that. Unfortunately, I have to treat everybody in a consistent manner the same way. This is my criteria. If you do not meet this, I cannot approve this application. And if you know you can't do it, I really don't want you to waste some money, because once you pay that application fee, it's non-refundable. That screening criteria eliminates so much of that. Set it, determine the type of tenant that you want, determine the type of things that you're looking for in a tenant that they must pass for them to become your tenant, and it eliminates all this stuff. So let's say you're already in it, and you're in a situation, non-pay rent or whatever else. There's always the cash for keys program as well, and it works. It just does. And if you think about it, let me see. Yeah, we got some things on here. So if you think about it, you're going to spend and lose this money anyway. And do you want to reward this person? No. But that's not your primary goal. Your primary goal is to get that person out of your house so that you can get it back on the market and get somebody in there that is paying you. If you want to be the purveyor of justice and make sure they get what's coming to them, and that they should really be hit with this, then fine, it's going to cost you. It is. And some people, you're going to make that determination, and that's perfectly okay too. I don't have a problem with that. But if your main goal, which in my opinion should be, because this is an investment, is to get that property back to generating rent revenue, then the sooner you get them out and back on the market, and somebody that is a good tenant in there paying your rent, the better off you're going to be. So estimate what the potential cost of leaving them in there is going to be. Your 2 to 3 months. What's the attorney cost going to be? Your lost rents, all the money you have to come out of pocket for your mortgages, your taxes, your insurance, the utilities or whatever else that, if you're paying for water at it and they're running up your water bill, any more potential damages, whatever it may be. And then come up with an amount. If it's going to cost a collective $3,000 to get them out over the next 2 months, say, hey, listen, $1,500, you're out by this date. I'll put cash in your hand. What do you think? 9 times out of 10, they're going to take it. You put it in writing, and then when they have vacated the home, then make the exchange. Don't gyp them. Don't say, oh, you don't even get petty about it. Don't be like, oh, but you didn't, I really don't think you met this one little provision, because if they take that to court, you're going to lose, and it's not going to turn out well. So make it simple. You go out by this date, home is in this condition, and you're not going to be able to say, you can, but I doubt if you're going to get it, but all trash cleaned out, all this, whatever those provisions are, put in writing. I want A, B, C, and D. Do you agree to these? Yes. If you do that, I'm going to give you $1,500 in cash, whatever, on this date once you're out. Meet them over there. They meet the provisions. Switch them out. They get out. You get your possession back. They get their $1,500. They're moving on. You're going to do this to somebody else probably, but 10 to 1, regardless of what you do, they're going to find a way to do it to somebody else anyway. So worry about your investment, unless you want to be that person that wants to make sure they can never do this to somebody else. I've been there. Sometimes I'm still there, and they've just jacked me so badly that I want to make sure they can't do it to anybody else, and I understand what it's going to cost me. Is what it is. But if you want that place back, Cash for Keys is a great program to do it. They do it, mortgage companies do it as well with homeowners, because they understand it's cheaper. Insurance companies, that's why they settle. It's cheaper to settle than to run that thing out. Not a lot of room for principle in business sometimes. Not when it comes to that stuff. Sometimes you just got to get the possession back so you can move on with it. Okay, so hey, listen, we're coming up on 50 minutes, so great timing for the eviction side of this. A lot of information that we went over today, kind of the tips and tricks how to prepare for collections. We talked about that rent collection process in the first section, and today we went over the types of different evictions, the eviction notices, what the eviction process looks like, abandoned property. We touched a lot of different things. Again, make sure to know your state-specific laws on the eviction process. This is really, it's a great overview. It really is. These are going to be consistent overall steps, but the filings may look different from this court to this court. The notices you have to post from this court to this court may be different. The time frames you have to wait they may vary. who gets those tenants out for you and what that process looks like may vary. But overall, the process is the same. So I think it'll put you on the right path. Do a little more digging, figure out what the specific steps are, and hopefully you don't have to mess with it a whole bunch. I mean, that's the goal. Do your screening, minimize evictions. We don't want evictions. Nobody wins on evictions. Okay, so resources for this last two sessions, the rent collections and eviction side of this. Again, we got that notice to pay or quit notice. We got the notice to comply notice. We got the 1430 notice. We got the unconditional notice to quit. I have more notices than you will ever need. There is something in that forms vault for everyone. I linked to the ones that we reviewed. I linked to the written payment agreement here for quick access, but go to the forms vault. Check them out. Check out the resident notices section. Check out all the state specific stuff, and they're great templates to start with. Some of them are just solid right out of the gate. So there's all that. I'm going to link again to the landlord tenant laws like we've done in other sections as well, like we've done in the forms vault, like we've done in the community section. But again, I want you to be able to find this easily. I don't want you to have to go dig for this stuff. And these are great resources to find out specific state tenant landlord laws and because some of these links will have information lined out on what abandoned property looks like and what security deposit return policies are. And so check out each of the links. They're not all exactly the same. They all link to landlord tenant laws, but they also have other resources in that same section that don't mirror the other ones. So check them all out, see what's there, because the trick about being a landlord and a property manager is not always having all the information. I don't have all the answers. I've had a lot of experiences, and so I know what I've dealt with, and I know what some of the stuff looks like. But more importantly is knowing where to look for the information. A lot of times when I have to answer questions, it's not because I know off the top of my head. It's just I know where to look to go to find the information. A lot of that is me going to landlord tenant law of that state and just reading what does the law say about it. What are the specific examples? What are some of the documents? Things along those. So it's a matter of being able to find the information. That's really what I'm trying to do for you here, is give you more resources than you could ever use in one place, so you don't have to. And you can find this stuff out. I mean, most of the stuff I'm referencing is on the internet. You could find that too. My goal here with this course, with this program, whatever section, whatever part of the program you are on with us, whether it's just the community side of it, whether you're just taking this course, whether, however you're participating in our program with the Landlord Launch, I want to bring as many resources as possible in one place for you. That way you're not all over the place, and then you can have access to the resources and you have access to people that can answer questions for you. So that's really, truly the goal, is to make it easy as possible for you to be a landlord and find the help you need. So a little bit long-winded there. Sorry. Let's go on and wrap this up. Make sure to join us for our weekly live Q&A sessions. Even if you don't have any questions, jump on anyway. Let's see what other people are asking. Sometimes you don't even know what you don't know, and other people's questions can be just as illuminating, if not more illuminating, than the questions you can think of yourself. So please join us there. And so that's it. We'll wrap it up. Thank you once again for being with us for this rent collections and eviction section here. And we will be, as we move forward, I think we have maintenance management, lease renewals, and the move-out process and the turnover process left. And we're coming up on the end of the management cycle here. And so there we go. We'll wrap this up, and we will see you next time.